Hello, you are on the channel with interesting stories. Let's start with all kinds of non-humans ours has never seen. Albert Fish, for example, wrote about you. Letters to the parents of their victims wherein described in detail how he raped and tortured boys in his Jeffrey Dahmer's basement refrigerator. Lay the severed heads of his victims. Kim de Geldern, dressed up as a clown, entered the nursery and stabbed several kids. List them. It might take a long time, but it's probably not worth it. Today's story will be about one maniac from whose story you'll definitely be shocked. American mass murderer, cannibal and necrophiliac. Richard Chase can be called one of the most brutal and terrible criminals in stories. USA in January 1978 to the residents of sunny Sacramento, capital of the state of California, became known that there is a serial killer at work in the suburbs. Organ devourer and drinker. The blood of his crime victims were so monstrous that they were difficult justify even by a huge number. Mental disorders with which you were born. Inhuman. Richard Trenton Chase, born 23 May 1950 in Santa Clara State, California. His parents were drunkards, alcoholics, and not at all were interested in the fate of their son and his younger sister, barely learning to walk. Richard was left to his own devices. During his childhood, the boy often became a target for bullying. Many of his peers considered him strange, and after the injury unusual on the playground, behavior became even more noticeable. Young Chase liked to inflict on himself injuries caused by cutting the skin with blades or glass. He liked the sight of blood and the pain from cuts. He loved to cause suffering and others, but bully other children. Puny Richard couldn't, so he tortured and killed those who couldn't snarl. He thought that the boy was ready. He brought death to all living things, set fire to and poured boiling water over anthills, strangled and gutted puppies, threw stones and firecrackers at old people and disabled teenagers. Chase, it was no longer enough to just kill. Addicted to drinking the blood of animals and birds. For Richard's inappropriate behavior, often neighbors beat them. They were afraid of a psychopathic child and demanded that his parents hand him over to psychiatric hospital. But they didn't care about their son's problems at all. Their life was about finding booze. Richard Chase himself became addicted to alcohol. At the age of 14 and at 15 he started using drugs. Addictions completely destroyed his personality. Chase cemented his reputation, a notorious bastard. In the area where the flayer lived there were no stray animals and the owners kept their pets under lock and key. Richard behaved no better at home. Stole money and booze from parents. Fought with them in a drunken stupor and ostentatiously masturbated in presence of mother and younger sister. It got to the point that in a rare moment, the elder Chases spent enlightenment, home advice, and decided to show his offspring. Specialists at 15 years old by Richard Chase. Examined by psychiatrists and diagnosed. Disappointing diagnosis. Additional schizophrenia in a youth. Discovered a whole bunch of deviations from pyromania. Before necrophilia, doctors also learned that teenager is keenly interested in serial killers and even admires. They were offered to the parents of the young monster. Put it in mental hospital. Perhaps if they agreed everything would have been different, but Richard's mother didn't want to hear about hospitalization. She was, I am sure that the doctors will bring her son until the state of a vegetable, and then the woman decided to kill her son independently using folk methods and hiking in church. Very soon the guy's condition, it got so bad that the family was afraid. Being in the same house with him, Richard shaved his head bald, stopped washing, and was constantly running around with some kind of knives and razors to satisfy the monster bought his passion for murder in zoo stores. Various small animals, canaries, fish, and hamsters alive. Crushed it in a mixer so that I could then drink the resulting slurry sometimes. Showed up at the local hospital and arranged. There was a row there. He fought in hysterics at the entrance, demanding the return of stolen for the rich kidney and pulmonary patients. Artery, one of the medics, on his head. I gave him the Medina reference book. After studying it, Chase decided that he had anemia. And only vitamins and alien will help you survive. Blood. He began to eat carrots and tried to inject blood intravenously. Parents noticed new rabbits in time. Son's hobby and decided to take it to Richard's psychiatric hospital because of his experiments. I could no longer stand on my feet. They took him to the clinic there as if he was bedridden. The patient was left alone in the Chase room. The very next day he ran away and returned home to arrange their pogrom. This time he was brutally detained and locked up in a prison-type hospital. Beverly. The menorah was served in this terrible place. Their endless deadlines the craziest villains of America. Chase was furious with that he was treated this way. He believed that he no place among cannibals and child murderers. Richard insisted that he absolutely healthy and all his actions are the result of the influence of certain sorcerers, Satanists, while the maniac continued destroy birds and animals which managed to catch it with his bare hands. During Chase spent walking in the hospital several years, after which he was released. Admitting not dangerous. Today it is difficult to understand logic. People who made this decision, but it's a fact. Remains a fact. In 1976 RD safely left the hospitable walls of the mental hospital at home. Greeted him aged and somewhat settled parents. Their health left much to be desired. Best youngest daughter by then got married and moved to her husband and parents. For some reason they thought they would find it in their son. Support for a couple of weeks. Richard and the truth fell. He helped his mother carry himself adequately. I looked at bags from the store in the evenings, series, and even read books, but then he adapted to free life and began. Here's to the old days again in the area. Living creatures began to disappear. Neighbors started finding them on their lawns. Cat entrails and dogs, as you would expect. Animal Chase not stopped. He was impressed by the stories. Maniacs from newspapers, and he wanted to kill a person somewhere. Having acquired an automatic pistol, Chase was going to arrange bloody carnage, but first he decided to practice. So on December 27, 1977, I burst into a lonely woman who owns a home. Lucky she was at work having searched. Richard shot the cottage in rage. Kitchen furniture and dishes, but no luck. Stopped the psycho, and after a couple of days Chase finally committed his first murder. Gunman shot an elderly man in the middle of the street. Engineer Ambruzzo Griffin, a man was walking with bags full of groceries from the supermarket when he collided with a maniac. The first murder was impressive. Chase and forced him to lie low. Locked himself at home and papered his room. Newspaper clippings telling about murder. Griffin's mother tried not to notice obvious things, and as always, crazy son's bedspreads. January 11, 1978, the bastard went to work again in wearing a mask, threatening with a weapon. He took away a neighbor's cigarettes. A week later he broke into the young man's house. The Edwards family, in their absence, Richard created a pogrom in the home and finally defecated in the crib. That time to him. Managed to escape because the neighbors called police. Another married couple was lucky. Les maniacs snuck into the house where they lived. Newlyweds David and Teresa Wallen. The husband was at work and Chase found 22-year-old pregnant Teresa at home. Sneaking into the cottage through the back door, a maniac kills a woman with a shot in the head. After that for several hours. Given perversions from which hair stand on end, he rapes and dismembers the corpse and then the insides. And the victim's blood is drained into the bathtub, then goes down there himself, splashes and rubs all this into his body, then maniac fills it with dog. Teresa's mouth and eye sockets are filled with feces, after which the psycho draws a glass of blood and goes home sipping scary drink through. Chase the straw of perfect madness. It didn't last long. After a couple of weeks, again feels an irresistible desire. Kill and drink blood, so he took it again. Pistol and went hunting. Sneaking into a randomly selected house. Richard killed, raped and chopped into pieces mother of three Evelyn Myritt. Her son Jason was shot in the chest by a maniac. And running towards the noise. Neighbor in the face of Evelyn, David's nephew. Richard was only a year and a half old. Shot right in the crib, then he smashed a child's skull and ate his brain. The bloody feast was in full swing when a friend of the already dead Jason came to the house. She scared Richard, who started to leaked. Maniac jumped over the green fence, holding a mutilated body in his teeth. Baby. He hasn't finished parting with him yet. Wished Chase knew the whole city, so the girl immediately told the police the name killers, but the cops delayed for 5 whole days before they came to arrest the maniac. All this time Chase mocked. With the child's body he drank all the blood from him. And emaciated beyond recognition, soon the police came to his home, but the man did not comply with the demand. Open the door. The detectives pretended to leave, and then Chase left the house with a box in his hands. Him immediately detained and found a gun in a box. .22 caliber with traces. Blood and pieces of his bloody wallpaper. Boots and jacket were also covered in blood. Chase was taken to the precinct for questioning by A. This time was spent in his apartment. Detectives found a search in the kitchen. Human remains. They lay on plates in a blender and in. There was blood everywhere in the refrigerator. A human lay out of the containers. Brain. After the press published the story of the adventures of Chase the Maniac, nicknamed the Vampire from Sacramento, many expected that the man declared insane and sent to prison. Forced treatment, but a miracle happened. And the court sentenced Richard to death. Execution. The trial of the maniac began on January 2, 1979. By that time, Chase was very lost weight despite his height of almost 2 meters. The weight was under 50 kilograms. The defense insisted that Richard is sick and cannot fully at least be responsible for your actions. Told during interrogation that he was forced to commit all these murders are Nazis who travel on flying plates. He agreed to go to them. Conditions could have saved his life, but less fact that Chase, besides murders, also committed several thefts, that is, broke into houses in order to get hold of valuables, did not fit into picture. Defense. The jury decided that Chase guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder. This meant that the punishment would be Richard was sentenced to death by gas camera. The verdict was announced on May 8, 1979. Right after this man sent to death row in prison, Chase was exposed to San Quentin. There attacks from other prisoners. However, they do not physically harm him. Cause. Just after Christmas, 26 December 1980, he committed suicide by taking lethal dose prescribed to him. He put off the antidepressant pills. Several months ended like that. The story of a vampire who became one of the most Disgusting maniacs of our earth, but not the only thing on this. I have everything. Thanks for watching and see you again.